Now let's think a little bit about 1988. 1988 in music. The Beatles, the Beach Boys, Dylan, and the Supremes were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Roy Orbison died. Tracy Chapman issued her first album called Tracy Chapman. And Bruce Springsteen went on the Tunnel of Love World Tour. In movies, it was A Fish Called Wanda, Beetlejuice, and Rain Man. In politics, Reagan was president. George H.W. Bush defeated Dukakis. Margaret Thatcher was prime minister in the UK. And in America, crack cocaine first appeared on the streets. In technology, a portable computer was the size of a sewing machine and weighed 15 or 20 pounds. The World Wide Web was actually created in 1988, leading to the creation of HTML language. So I tell you all of that to tell you that APSE was created without email, without websites, without blogs, without Twitter, without eStore, without online training, without PowerPoint, without Wikipedia, without Skype, without Facebook, Tumblr, MySpace, MapQuest, Yahoo, Google, Spotify, or Pandora. And the best video game we had was Pac-Man. In the economy, the Dow Jones was at 2,000 points after a disastrous 1987 where the stock market dropped 500 points in a single day. Make that a 20% drop. Median income was $27,000, which is equal to about the $47,000 median income now adjusted for inflation. A gallon of gas was 95 cents, unemployment was 5.5%, and a first-class postage stamp was 22 cents. In 1988, the planet had 5.3 billion people. Today it has over 7 billion. Now, listening to those facts, there are four kinds of people in this room. One group is saying, wow, I'd forgotten all of that. The second group says, wow, has it really been that long? Seems like yesterday. The third group says, wow, that was forever ago. And the fourth group says, seriously. Is that true? You didn't have the internet? You know which group you're in. So one of the wonderful things about APSE that's been true from the very beginning, and having been to so many of the annual conferences, is leadership. Leadership everywhere. Small towns, big cities. Rural, urban, suburban, leaders. You show up, APSE expects you're a leader and needs it. And we're going to celebrate leadership in a conversation with longtime leader Paul Wehman from Virginia Commonwealth and Wendy Wood, founder of APSE. We'll be talking to him in just a minute. And one of the great things about APSE and what you started, Wendy, was this alacrity in the organization, a mission where people pursue this with cheerful enthusiasm almost every day. So many leaders, too many to name all of them, but I will name a few. And first, a few we've lost. If these names are familiar to you, remember them. If they're not, ask somebody later in this reception about them. Friends, we've lost Rebecca McDonald. From New Jersey. Mike McAllister. Ron Rucker. Dave Hammis. And a name known to all of you, Justin Dart. Justin Dart came to at least one APSE conference, and he's the only speaker I know that could get away with this. Justin Dart at the front of the stage saying, and this is a direct quote, "Patriots of supported employment, I love you." Now, I also want to acknowledge other leaders. If you've ever been on the board of a state chapter, raise your hand. We should all say thank you. If you've been the president of a state chapter, raise your hand. We thank you. If you've been on the National APSE Board, raise your hand. Thank you. Leaders in the room all around. Now, before I get to those that have been presidents of the National APSE, I want to acknowledge our line of executive directors. First, Wendy, who we'll talk to in a minute. Tamara Gary, Executive Director, we think, for 12 to 14 years. Selene McWhorter, 4 or 5 years. And now 5 years running, Laura Owens. Thank you. The presidents of APSE. Scary job off and on, always exciting. But here they've been from the very beginning. The first was, of course, Mark Hill. And if you're in the room, please stand when I say your name. Second president was Rebecca McDonald. Bob Lawhead. Dale DeLeo. Pat Rogan. Bob Nemec. Susie Hutchinson. Teresa Grassi. Ron Rucker. John Alexander. David Hoff. Thank you so much. Leadership in this role is both a joy and a great deal of work, as you know. So I want to invite Paul Wehman and Wendy Wood up to the table. So this is going to be a conversation about kind of where things came from the viewpoints of leaders, past and present, and about where it might be going in the future. And Paul, I want to start with you. And we were talking earlier that when I first got involved in this in 1980 in Eugene, Oregon, I was handed a book. And the book was about competitive employment for people with disabilities, and it was written by Paul Wehman. So Paul, you've been a incredible steadfast leader for so many years and invited so many of us to bring our talents and enthusiasm along the way. So, you were there before the book was written. And when you think about supported employment, initially kind of storming and forming, what were you hoping for? What were you thinking?
Okay, so there's no way I'm going to do this without acknowledging David Mank. Okay, let's hear it. Give it up for David Mank. As I was telling Pat Rogan when we were in Ireland at the European Conference a couple weeks ago, I don't know how many times I have asked this man to go travel for me because I didn't want to travel. You remember the time I asked you to go to Japan at the last minute because I said I had a bad heart or whatever, but I didn't really. I just didn't want to go, okay? Anyhow.
Good to know.
Yeah. Anyhow, he was willing to, ride the trains and eat the fish. I really, this guy has always been there, so I had to get that out. I can be much shorter on what we were thinking. I would like to say that there was some huge grand plan. There really wasn't. I'm basically your, nowadays ABA guy, but really back in the day, behavior modification guy working in a state institution and really not knowing why anybody couldn't be working. And to give all the credit in the world, we had Vicki Brooke and Janet Hill, who were just great. We call them trainer advocates. That was the term that was used back in the day, trainer-advocate, before the term employment specialist and job coach and whatever came up. But I think I can trace back the thought process to a little company called Physio Control that took place in Oregon, and this modest man to my right here was working with somebody named Larry Rhodes and Tom Bellamy and Rob Horner, and they had taught using behavior modification techniques individuals with severe intellectual disabilities how to put together medical defibrillators for a company called Physio Control. And I remember reading that article in 1978 thinking, wow, that's really neat. We can do better than that, okay? And the old kind of burned out jock in me came out, and the next thing you knew, we were convincing a parent that they should put their son into a job that he was not qualified for and he couldn't do, but because we knew how to do behavior modification, he was employed. And we always kind of say that Charlie Harris was really the father of supported employment. He worked in that job for 24 years, and you remember. And as far as what we were looking for, we were just looking for the next placement and the next placement, and we didn't want people to get fired. We wanted to use a place and train model, not a place and pray model. And I think as the years went on, Dave, we kind of hoped that maybe a few other programs in Virginia and maybe the country would A, stop bashing us, and B, maybe try it. We never really thought it would get in the Rehab Act in 1986 and all the things that followed.
So Paul, literally across the street, or at least across Richmond, APSE is forming. What did you think about a rule for APSE? Because it was kind of unlike anything on a national basis that existed related to employment, at least.
Right. No, when APSE originally started in its fragile form, we were like, yes, we can't believe how good this is. Because think about it a minute. Of course, many of you won't be thinking about this because you weren't there, okay? But between 1986, stay with me on this for a moment, between 1986 and 1991, the federal government decided they were going to give grants out to 27 states to do support employment implementation. Those were golden days, and then they gave out another 20 grants after that. And then the grants went away in 91 and 92 and 93. And we knew that if we didn't have an APSE formed, that there would not be a legitimate, credible voice at the table for this area called supported employment. And so, you know, when you look at the things that APSE's done, I mean, we could go on for hours, but I mean, just to jot down a handful. Credibility, a voice at the disability table in Washington, D.C. Selene McWhorter did a slam dunk job of getting our voice heard. Helping promote sheltered work as no closure for rehab, okay, as of 2001. Having a voice in Olmsted, you know, no question at all, having huge voice in the 1997 Medicaid waiver revision. Some of you may remember the name Bob Gettings, okay? They stuck in the Medicaid waiver law, supported employment, as something that could be funded. I mean, do you realize what that means? I mean, a lot of our long-term funding, we had none. APSE was there pushing for that. Small, fragile APSE was making noise to that effect, okay? And, you know, where are we now? We're at a point where the Department of Justice is now in 15 states, is telling certain states to close workshops, and at the end of the day, that's an APSE deal, okay, by being at the table and making noises and being there. Because the other associations, that was not their thing to do, okay? And this is not saying the other associations weren't appropriate, but this was the APSE role.
So, Wendy, we have to ask, you started this. What were you thinking?
Well, thinking now that I probably didn't have very good sense, because I really didn't know what I was doing. I knew there was an incredible energy. There was something very different about supported employment, helping an individual with severe disability to get into a real job was it's sort of a life-changing activity. You really felt the reward of that. I remember when I went into special education, people would come up and say, "Oh, that's so rewarding," and I really didn't feel that until I got into supported employment. That really was rewarding. So the work that was going on with all of the big name leaders, Paul and Frank Rush and Tom Bellamy and Dave Mank and all the others, the RRTC symposiums, the Ellensburg Conference, the money that Paul was talking about that was out there, there was this wave of enthusiasm and energy, and people were discovering this new way of doing things. And Mark and I just decided we needed our own thing somehow. Supported employment needed its own thing, and we, we put our Rolodexes together. We wrote some, initial sort of introduction letter and sent it out, and I was telling people, I can't remember the name, but the first membership came in from somebody in Alabama. So if the Alabama delegation is here, anybody from Alabama, congratulations for that. There were all kinds of stories, but I'm not sure if I thought I had good sense, but I just knew we needed to corral the energy, and policy was critically important. Paul had led in that in so many ways, but we needed an entity to be the representative for that.
Well, and prior to APSE, it was an opportunity for university folks to get together and maybe some demonstration projects, but not the rest of us.
Yeah.
And APSE became the place for all of us.
Yeah.
So, so what do you think now of APSE? You walk in, there are 39 chapters. That's kind of parallel to the notion that there are now 26 states that have some kind of employment first policy or legislation. Like when you walk in the room and think about this is APSE today, what do you see?
Wow, I'm amazed. I'm so proud of all of you, the work that you've all been doing, the chapters, the energy, the policy push at local and national levels is just amazing. So this is what it needed to be, and I've been away from it for a long time, and stepping back into it, I probably am so much more amazed than you are at yourselves. It's just amazing.
So one last question for both of you about the future. It's like, okay, we've seen 25 plus years of an idea that captured the imagination of everybody in this room and frankly thousands like us. about the capabilities of our family, friends, and neighbors that have significant disabilities. Where do you see this going now? Paul, you first.
I think one of the reasons that APSE has flourished is because the people in this room and the many, many people that cannot be here have been incredibly reinforced by the way they can help influence a life change. When you look at what Aaron Riley and Susie Rutkowski and the dozens of project searches around the country are doing, and that's just one example. It's one near and dear to me because we've just participated recently in a graduation and literally watching the families just going nuts that their sons or daughters are getting employed. This is a highly reinforcing thing that we get to do, and we should never minimize that. That's where our source of growth will come. I would throw out several key challenges that we need to do, and I can do this quickly, David. One is we really need to close the workshops, and we need to close adult activity segregated centers. We've talked about this, and we've talked about it, and we've talked about it. We need to take a very hard line on that, if we have to do it over a 24-month period or a 36-month period, but now is the time, because the Department of Justice is giving us a window. We need to move on that very aggressively. Secondly, we wrote an editorial about this a decade ago. We do not have targets. John Butterworth, you look at the report he puts out, you look at the report Braddock puts out, and we're stuck at the 20% level, yada, yada, yada. The reality is we need to set annualized goals using the employment first mechanism on a year-to-year basis over the next 5 to 7 years and get to that 50 to 70% marker of people being employed. Because when we get to 50 to 70%, the wind's at our back. The rest will come. But as long as we're at that 20, 25% area, we're stuck. We have to have goals. We do not have goals, and we need to have those goals. Third, the sub-minimum wage has to go. Friday night, you probably saw it or you heard about the fact that Goodwill was called on the carpet for paying pennies for work. They tried 8, 9 years ago to get rid of this, remember, in Arizona. I remember Kerry Griffin, another huge leader of this group, writing letters to the Attorney General in Arizona, and they backed down on that. That sub-minimum wage is it's depraving, it is marginalizing, and it immediately sets a notion of can't do. That has to go. Fourth, the IDEA reauthorizations are going on right now. We need to get a voice at the table for customized employment and support employment to be in that law, okay? Because we know, Rich Lukey and I are involved with doing research right now, looking at the NLTS2 to reinforce what we already know, and that is people that get jobs before they exit school stay in those jobs and are better likely to be employed. We have a powerful tool at our hands here. Customize and support employment. We need to get it in this law. And I think it's very possible. So that would be a next step for us. And then finally, to all of the employment specialists that are sitting out there that are just 6 months into the job and trying to figure out what you're supposed to do, I'm sorry that we don't have training academies set up. I'm sorry that our universities haven't risen to the challenge. And I would say to APSE, even if it's a small number, we need to have training academies the way Karen Flippo did in 1984 at University of San Francisco when we set up these internships. Without these clinically based learning academies, we are not going to have the next generation of employment specialists like I'm blessed to work with at VCU right now. So I used up my time a little bit, but I want to get that all in.
Well said, Paul. Very well said, indeed. And Wendy, last word going forward, advice, ideas, and then National APSE has something we want to give you.
Well, it's hard to follow that list of suggestions. I think Paul hit a lot of them. When we, I would just, maybe I don't need to add this, maybe it's obviously, everybody knows this, but when we're talking about closing the sheltered workshops, don't let them gobble up that money. That money needs to be redirected. And so Laura and the rest of the policy people at the table need to say, no, you can't have that money back. We're just going to reuse that money for something new. Yes, get in the schools again. I've been talking to a lot of people about that. I'm in teacher training now. I've talked quite a few teachers out of classrooms into job sites. It's a sickness I'll never get over. I think my eyes light up when I start talking about supported employment, and some teachers have decided to do things other than special ed classrooms. But yes, get back into the education arm of it. Keep doing what you're doing. Your energy, your excitement, your advocacy in every way is running. It's carrying this snowball forward, and it's just so exciting to see. I can't tell you how wonderful it is. Thank you for inviting me back. I'm so enjoying this.
And you know what? I'm going to pull one on David Mank right now. Dave, what do you think we need to do for the future?
That's good.
I should always be prepared to say a few words.
He's always
Well, I have to agree with Wendy, with you and Paul. Certainly with your points, I think will take us down the right road. I think we need to make sure that we're in solidarity with schools about the expectations of young people. And the truth of the matter is that's family by family, teacher by teacher, and we need them all. They need us. So if there was one thing I would add, it would be the solidarity that goes with high expectations, an expectation of employment. If we can solve the transition problem properly in a generation, the problem is entirely solved. So, think both. It wasn't easy for either one of you to get here, but I think what it means to this organization is huge. So it's just a pleasure and a joy to listen to the history and think about the future at the same time in the same room. Thank you. Now, we have something for you, Wendy, and Laura's coming up here, and this is from National APSE, and she would like to present this to you. And do you want to grab a microphone there?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Paul shut it off on me. We are presenting Wendy Wood with the Founding Member Award for our 25th anniversary. And we put the Margaret Mead quote, which I thought was very appropriate for what we're doing. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So we thank you for your vision and starting APSE.
All right. Here's what's going to happen now. Tell stories to each other. There are a million stories in this room that matter, that move forward the notion of a decent job for everybody with a significant disability that wants one. So let's hear some of those stories amongst ourselves tonight and beyond. Number two, tomorrow starting at 8:30 in the morning in Grand Ballroom 7, there's a company that would love to do interviews. A few minutes from anybody that's here. Presenters, participants, somebody walking by to talk about what's happening here. So show up at Grand Ballroom 7 sometime tomorrow if you're interested in having your voice heard on this topic.